Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted once again to be joined by Colin Watt for the ACSOM Transfer Bulletin Mark 1. Colin, welcome back to the studio.
Thanks very much for having us. It's an exciting day, Paul.
We spoke months ago, didn't we, about putting together a transfer show. It was tongue-in-cheek at the time, but the closer we got to it and the fact that we started to master all the technology, I'm saying that with a caveat that, you know, if the sound drops out, give me a shout. We're here, we're sitting here. This is part one. We're going to be joined in a couple of hours by Lawrence Connolly,
yep,
who regular viewers of the Celtic State of Mind will know, and then later on, Kevin Graham. I'm going to be taking some of this kit home with me, and I'll be doing another one at 12 o'clock tonight. It'll start at 11. I'll be doing a night shift, mate. Right, so first and foremost, there's loads to get through. This isn't just a show where we're going to be talking about current transfer targets, because there actually aren't enough of them to fill a whole show. We've got a live bulletin sitting to my left, your right, so if anything happens, we'll be aware of it. Mm-hmm. But we were very interested to hear that Diego Laxalt of AC Milan has been strongly linked to Celtic. Before we go any further, I'm going to give a big shout out to Stevie Ray, who actually called us quite a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I've actually heard his name being put about a few times. Seems to be very highly rated. I was interested to see what Tim Vickery, a South American football expert, had to say, and he's impressed with him. He's got 24 caps for Uruguay, something like that. Is he the final piece of the jigsaw? Is that the final player that's going to be coming in today? I'm not so sure. I think there might be moves for one or two more players that might just surprise people. But Diego Laxalt is fantastic. We've finally got someone who is in the ilk of Frimpong. That's what we've been going on about for a long time now, trying to get someone who is attack-minded, going down the left-hand side to complement Frimpong being on the right-hand side. He's done very well for Uruguay at the World Cup. The interesting part for me, though, is he's coming from AC Milan. And obviously, as we all know, we drew AC Milan in the group stages of the Europa League. So, yeah, it's a cynic amongst us would say it's a bit of a weird one to sign someone from the team we're about to play. But if this is the player that Celtic's been after for a period of time, which, as you said, Stevie Ray says we've been doing it for a while, we've been looking at him, and we're getting the deal over the line, we're getting the player that we've been after, then for me, I'm absolutely delighted. From what we understand, he's undergoing a medical in London at the moment, and he will be making his way up to Glasgow this evening to be paraded. Fingers crossed all goes well and we get that deal over the line, and who knows, hopefully before the end of the night we'll have one or two more to talk about as well.
So we're talking a loan deal?
It's a
with
loan
an option
deal
to buy?
Well, we're unsure about that at the moment. The loan deal has been agreed between Celtic and AC Milan. Whether that's going to be a loan with a view to a permanent move at the end of the deal is unclear yet. From what we understand, AC Milan are looking to insert a clause that would mean that Celtic would have to pay €9 million if they were looking to get him. Now, I think you said his age just before we came on air. Was he 27, 28?
27, Colin.
So €9 million at 28 he'll probably be by the time that comes round. It's not a typical deal that Celtic would go for, although we did make a similar purchase in the sense of Christopher Julian. So it's not out the realms of possibility. But as we've went on and on about, this is the season that we're most concerned about. This is 10 in a row. If it means that we're going to bring in guys on loan deals just to get the team that we need to win the 10, then I'm all for it, and hopefully we'll be welcoming them to Celtic Park in the not too distant future.
Well, Colin, we do have plenty to discuss because it's been a very interesting few months in relation to buying players, the transfer window, football in general.
Yep.
And I've been watching the breaking news all morning this morning. Some of the money that is flying around the English game, we already knew it was preposterous.
Yeah.
But under the circumstances, it seems to be continuing at pace, the amount of money that's been spent. Celtic, we looked at the change in approach, if you like, of the type and the calibre of players that we've been bringing in. And the first part of this bulletin, Colin, is players that we've been linked to in this window. And what I've done is I've compiled a list of players that we, within a Celtic State of Mind, have discussed as possible links. There might be others in the extended sources and out there on the web, but these are the ones that we've discussed over the last few months. I've got a list of 18, but I'm going to discuss 6 with you, 6 with Lawrence and 6 with Kevin as we go on. So anyone who's watching is thinking that we're missing anyone out, we are splitting it up. So let's have a look. Now, we're obviously been speaking about Diego Laxalt coming in from AC Milan. There's been a few other bits of interest in the Italian markets in Mattia De Sciglio and Omar Colley, Juventus and Sampdoria. We were speaking the other day there about Colley being close to signing for Fulham, so I'm pretty sure if that's not already been done, that bit of business will get confirmed. De Sciglio wasn't sure on coming to Scotland. He wasn't convinced moving from Juve to Celtic at that stage when that interest was mentioned. It's interesting that we've had that Italian interest, I think, and obviously we've gone for Laxalt. I'll be pretty chuffed with that, I've got to say. Ryan Sessegnon signed for Hoffenheim this morning on loan. I heard it was because when you look at his name, he's actually called Kouassi. Neil Lennon seen that and moved on. Kouassi, Ryan Sessegnon, they'd already got one out. We want to bring in another one in. Obviously, we missed out on Aaron Hickey, the young guy who had played at Celtic as a youngster. He moved on to Hearts. We had a clause in his contract which meant that if he moved on, we had a percentage of the transfer fee. We were interested in signing Hickey, but when Bologna were dangling quite a large carrot in terms of his weekly wages, Celtic were out in terms of that. We could have matched the transfer fee, no problem. And he's gone on to Bologna. Seems to be impressing over there so far. Would he have been the answer to our left back woes? Ivan Toney. We were interested in Toney around about the Ajeti time of the Yeti deal. Toney scored a couple of goals yesterday against Scots Kit Sinclair's Preston. And Alfie Doughty as well, the Charlton youngster who we've been strongly linked with. What I would ask is, at the moment, of all of those players, obviously some of them have already gone elsewhere, do you think any of them are still on Celtic's radar, those who haven't made any moves?
I think Doughty's still on Celtic's radar. I think Doughty is a long-term option for Celtic. And just reading recently, in the last sort of half hour or so, it looks as if Celtic will be concentrating on getting him on a pre-contract in January, which I think will be a great deal for Celtic. Not so good for Charlton, so sorry for any Charlton fans that are listening in.
And there are a few, because they were giving me stick last week.
I remember you saying
on Twitter.
But it looks as if this will be kind of similar to the boys at Ben Davies at Preston as well that we're interested in, talking about pre-contracts. It's good to see Celtic still looking in that market. I remember when Neil Lennon was here the first time, we got guys like Joe Ledley on a pre-contract. Mikael Lustig joined on a pre-contract as well. So it's good to see that we're looking at that market. I think Nick Hammond's done a great job since he's came in. But for me, I think the only one out of that list that would potentially still go on to be a Celtic player in the future would be Doughty.
It is an interesting one because I think the big issue has been around the fee. Celtic, I believe, have offered something like a third of what Charlton are expecting to receive for him. And obviously, we'll look at other options that have come through when Lawrence and then Kevin come on the show later on today. But when we're looking at that, still on the radar, you think Alfie Doughty. And who would you say, if any, was the one that got away from the list of 6 that we've looked at this morning?
I still think Sessegnon would have been outstanding
Box
at Celtic
office.
Park.
Yeah.
Definitely. It seemed to be the issue came down to the loan fee that Spurs were looking for. Spurs were looking for somewhere in the region of £2.5 to £3 million in a loan fee. Now I know we've already shelled out quite a bit for Shane Duffy to come up on a loan fee. I'd imagine Mohamed Elyounoussi will be the same as well. So it is, I mean, when you're talking, if you put those 3 loan fees together, they're probably the cost of a Yeti's transfer, if not more. So I can understand why Celtic would be reluctant to splash out again on someone you're only going to get a year out of. I think Duffy's got a potential to maybe come here permanently at the end of the contract. There's no option to buy at the minute, but if you're playing for your boyhood heroes, you always want to kind of stay there. So I can understand why Celtic wouldn't splash out that kind of money, but it would have been fantastic to see someone like that, and I can only hope that Laxalt is in the same ilk of Sessegnon and produces the goods.
The thing with Sessegnon, it's a discussion we've had quite a bit on a Celtic State of Mind, Colin. This, raising the bar in terms of the calibre of player that we've been bringing in this window based on previous windows. And, there's possible options for Celtic in this window to bring in a few. We've seen it a few times before where, quite a few players at the tail end of the transfer window came in and they were project signings. And it's, chaps like Afolabi, who's at Dundee now. And I think Frimpong initially came in and he was of that ilk. It's just that his progression has been quite steep. So there might still be a couple of guys coming in at the tail end. And it wouldn't surprise me, to be honest, if for example, and it's a player that we might speak about later on, the young kid at Motherwell, Alan Campbell, might come in and we might spend 200-300 grand on a player like that to bring him in, maybe loan him straight back to Motherwell. I've been hearing that Campbell wouldn't be averse to a move, but he might be looking outside of Scotland, so that would be an interesting one as well. And so we've asked you the one that got away, still on the radar. What about any wildcards? Anybody like what Stevie Ray did a few weeks ago, and he threw this in, and it seems to be working out, Diego Laxalt. Anybody that we've not really been mentioning that you still think could come to Celtic Park?
Well, you did mention the player I was probably going to say there, and Alan Campbell. I think Alan Campbell would be a great signing, especially at the price that Motherwell are looking to cash in for. So I think he would certainly be a good one to come in and loan back out again. I'm not really sure. It seems as though we're kind of in that phase now of, if you've not really been linked with a move, then it will need to be something totally out of the blue, and there doesn't really seem to be anybody along that kind of lines. I think we might still go into the market for a centre back.
Right.
I have a feeling that we'd quite like to run with maybe another centre back, and who knows, maybe we could look at someone like Benkovic to come back in.
I've mentioned him in dispatches, it's got to be said, and the reason I mentioned him is because we know the player, we know that he would fit, we know exactly what he can do. I think the reason Neil Lennon didn't play him second time round when Lenny came in on an interim basis was simply because he was planning ahead at that stage. He knew that Benkovic was away in the pre-season, so he thought, well, he was actually planning ahead to get the job and go into the following season, Colin. So it wasn't as though Lenny didn't fancy him.
No.
I always liked Benkovic, I really did, and I think the concern was that he was injury prone. That was always a concern.
Yeah.
And obviously we did move on his big buddy Simunovic, and it was the kind of case that we moved him on, we were bringing a similar problem if we bring in Benkovic in terms of injuries. So yeah, that's an interesting one. Will it happen? Do you think we'll do any, this is maybe going into one of the later sections of this podcast, do you think we'll do business with Leicester?
Look, I think there's still a good relationship between Celtic and Leicester. As much as we as fans really don't like the fact, and probably still most of us can't stand the fact that Rodgers left us in the way that he did, for Celtic, the business sense of it, I mean, they got somewhere in the region of £7 to £8 million for the three moving on in compensation. So
7 to 8 rather than 78.
Yes, 7 to 8. Sorry, for the three of them moving on. So I wouldn't rule it out. I listened to Anthony Joseph yesterday from Sky, and he was talking about Celtic looking to bring in a left back, a right midfielder, and a centre midfielder. I'd love that to be the case today. I'd love that we go and make 3 signings and add to the squad that we've got, because as Alan Morrison pointed out last night, we've only really got 24 of a first team squad, and then you're looking at bringing in guys like Karamoko Dembele, Cameron Harper, Kerr McInroy's moved out on loan, Jonathan Afolabi, as you mentioned, has moved out on loan. So it's just, as I've always mentioned, I like to have 3 players in every position, so it'd be good to get that kind of up there. I think if anything's going to happen today, it'll be loan deals, unless something like the Alan Campbell deal comes up. And who knows, maybe we might go back at the 11th hour for Robert Snodgrass if we end up losing someone today.
Well, Snodgrass will certainly appear in a later list on one of the bulletins. This is the first transfer bulletin of 3. We will be looking at some of the comments coming in just a second via YouTube, Twitter and Facebook, Colin. If anyone is watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe. We're building our subscriber base at the moment. We're almost up at 3,000. We're going to double it. We're going to treble it. We're going to keep going until we have a huge subscriber base. Everything we do is free. And so, yes, we will be having a look to see what you're thinking out there. And we're speaking to Beat It. And I don't know if that's a reference to Michael Jackson. I mean, that's way before your time.
Great song, though.
Well, YouTube could be a fantastic player for us. I think what you're looking at there is the fact that I will be asking you in a moment. You mentioned Alan Morrison's comments, and then obviously where we might be looking to strengthen. It's quite obvious that we need an out-and-out left back. I mean, Greg Taylor is a left back. He's been playing left wing back, and we certainly need cover in that position. So if we go out and buy Laxalt or bring him in on loan, then we're going to fill that area. Follower Celtic, morning lads, and a big good morning to yourself as well. Or is it afternoon? I think we've just crept into the afternoon.
Afternoon, guys.
Ian, so good to hear from you as well. Stephen Forbes says that Stevie Ray was spot on yesterday with regards to the signing policy. No more projects for now. We need experience, and we need winners. It's a hugely important day for the club season. And I think that's been the way that Neil Lennon's approached it, isn't it, since he's come back in? Yeah,
and I think this transfer window specifically kind of highlighted that. We haven't really signed anyone that's been a project player. Some will say Turnbull's one, but I think he's someone that can immediately come in and make an impact. You guys have mentioned before signing guys like Albion Ayeti. I mean, that was a £5 million signing. Originally meant to be a loan deal, and Celtic spent the money to make it a permanent deal up front. That is the kind of players that we're being linked with now. And Diego Laxalt was in the exact same sort of ilk. He's a quality player. We're not going and looking for project players, and that's why I think Aaron Hickey, as much as I think he would have been a decent signing for the future for Celtic, he's probably not what we needed right now.
No, I totally agree with that. And we have been speaking about the approach, but then if we go back, and we will be looking back at the end of this show to some of the signings that Lenny brought in first time round, he was very good at very quickly changing the look of a side, Colin. And I think if you bring in another 2, which I'm expecting today, you're then looking at a situation where we've brought in 7 players. So, you know, that is certainly going to look like a Neil Lennon team, because they're all first team players, they're all first picks, like you've just said there. There's no projects that we're maybe not going to be seeing for 6, 8, 12 months. And then obviously some of them we never see again, like the aforementioned Kouassi. No disrespect to the boy. Helen McCallum, good afternoon, happy Monday to you both, and to yourself, Helen. You're commenting on YouTube, as is DM Kids Adventures, listening in Chicago. Great show. How good is that when we hear from the audience on the other side of the world? That's tremendous.
What time would they be in Chicago now? Is that like 5 hours behind? 7 o'clock in the morning? Good morning to you.
Billy Subs Grant hopes that we do sign the left back from AC Milan. And Richard Hargreaves, thanks for getting involved via YouTube. Good afternoon to you as well. Now, this brings us on to someone who will be discussing at length in part 2 or 3 of the bulletin, which will be out later on. Hope we get Snodgrass. This is from Charles Broadfoot. Worth it for free kicks and corners. Although we will be discussing that later on. Colin, what's your thoughts on our link to Snodgrass?
Well, from my understanding, he was someone that was going to come in to replace a player at Celtic. I believe there was talks of a first team player moving on, and Snodgrass was coming in to make the kind of numbers up in that sense. But what a player to bring in that, if that is the case. Originally it looks as if West Ham were open to a loan deal, but now they want a permanent deal. They want him out, they want him off the wage bill. So I think you can make a guess at who it would be that would be potentially going if he was to come in. But again, it's someone of a Premiership ilk. If you look at the players we've signed this season, we're not signing guys from the Championship or League 1 or League 2 or kind of the second division of the Polish league. We're signing guys that are quality players. I mean,
established Premier League players in England, yeah.
And then we're signing guys from Serie A as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's we've definitely moved up a level in the players that we're being linked with, and I think that can only be said that it's attributed to the fact that we're going to places like Lazio and getting the 3 points. So the better we perform in Europe, the more attractive we become to players like this.
Absolutely. It does feed into times like this in the season when you're trying to get top class players into the club. Now, let's have a look at the transfer business so far, because we've been very complimentary about the business that Celtic and Neil Lennon have done this season, Colin. It's been very impressive. As you quite rightly said, we're going into the English Premier League and we're buying players and loaning players from that level. We've brought in 5. I would expect that to rise to at least 6, maybe 7 by the end of today. We're going to talk to you about 2 of those signings. First one being the return of Mohamed El Yunusi, who again is on an extended loan deal from Southampton. What's your thoughts been so far on El Yunusi this season?
At first, I think he took a bit of time to kick on. We hadn't really seen him since the League Cup final last season. And in the kind of build-up before that, we were really impressed at him. He has such a good pedigree for a player. We played against him seasons ago, and from then on, he's always been someone that we've looked at to try and get in. I think we did try to get him in a couple of years ago before he went to Southampton as well. So when you get someone of that quality, it definitely adds a different dynamic to your team. And now in the last sort of 3 or 4 games, he's certainly kicked on. And I think he's a very important player for us this season. I think he'll pop up with some really crucial goals, and he's another person that you can rely upon when you're going into bigger games to give you a performance. He's not going in nervous. He's not someone who shies away in the bigger games. He's someone that steps up to the plate. And if you're looking for any sort of example for that, then I would go back to the game I just mentioned, the Lazio game away from home, where he was outstanding, setting up the first goal, and he played a fantastic 90 minutes. So when you've got someone like that as part of your squad, you can only hope that it helps bring on some of the players that we've got there.
Yeah, definitely. Where do you think his best position is, Colin? Because I think he was becoming less and less effective out left. He's been brought in, obviously, for the European game and was very effective as a substitute against Riga, and he's maintained that position since. Do you think that's his best position?
I think definitely either in the supporting striker role or in that sort of position behind the front two. I was crying out for him to be playing in that position ahead of guys like Christie, who was kind of the kind of first name on the sheet for that place. His link-up play with Odsonne Edouard last year was phenomenal when we were playing the 4-2-3-1, and I think he can still do that. He still seems to have that sort of link-up, and now that he's got his former teammate in Albin Ayeti in there, you're hoping that partnership, if you can get Ayeti, Edouard and El Yunusi as your front three, I think that could be really deadly going forward this season.
Now, as well as El Yunusi, Vasilis Barkas. Now, in an early ACSOM bulletin, you threw that name into the hat. I'm not quite sure why. Ex-AEK Athens, but lo and behold, we signed him, £4.5 million. For some strange reason, he came in for a bit of stick in the Scottish media. I say for some strange reason, we all know why that is. Try to unsettle the brand new signing. But he really is growing into a bit of a fan's favourite, isn't he? Even yesterday when it's nothing each and he's almost 50 yards out of his goal, trying to get involved in the lead-up to make something happen. I like him a lot. I think he's a kind of calming influence at the back, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. And I think he is, as we're still putting together the back three at the minute, he's the one there that is the ever reliable. I know he had a bit of a scare yesterday when he came out to collect the cross ball, but I mean, there's been so many of those this season where he's come out and he's been so commanding within his area. I looked up his stats. He's got 8 clean sheets in 12 games so far for Celtic, which is phenomenal. And when I put his name out there, I knew it was someone that we were looking at last season. And when it was said, with all the kind of coronavirus and COVID that was going on, that we would only be really looking at guys that we'd previously been linked with, then Barkas seemed the clear choice. When we looked at the options that we had with guys like David Marshall, Fraser Forster, who ended up turning us down, Barkas was the kind of player for me that stood out and was someone I thought would really come in and do a job for us. And I think so far that's really been the case. He's not really been tested so far. Some of the goals that we've conceded this season, the penalty he nearly got his hand to. The wonder goal against Livingston, I think not many keepers would have saved that, if any.
No.
An own goal, that was Scott Bain. So there's not really been a lot of time this season where you've been like, the goalkeeper should have done a lot better.
Well, you can't blame him for the one Scott Bain let in, can you?
No, some people will try though. The goal at St Mirren, I think the keeper was actually going to save it, but it takes a deflection off Christie to go in. So there's not a lot you can really say about that. I mean, you look at the first half performance at Ross County, where he made 3 or 4 cracking saves.
Yeah.
The game against St Mirren, he made some really important saves. I think he'll be a guy that really grows into the position. I think he's here for the long term.
I would hope so, and I think it's been a good bit of business by Celtic. They weren't hanging about after we realised the Foster deal wasn't going to be done, Colin, and a lot of work had gone into that already.
Yeah. We
had him as a backup, and what a backup he's been. We'll look back at some more of the points coming through on the social media channels via Facebook. The Uruguayan would be a great signing. Would love Snodgrass too. I mean, I don't even think Snodgrass has divided opinion a great deal. We know that he's 33. I think I read a report where his wages were probably over 50 grand a week. It would need to be some bit of negotiations to bring him into the club. And someone beat it again on YouTube has just commented, I thought the Snodgrass deal had collapsed. Well, certainly when Neil Lennon was asked about it yesterday after the game, he didn't give any kind of reason as to for us to believe that it was going to happen, but you never know about these things. And Football Prime Ginger, afternoon, amazing signing if we get Laxalt. I would agree with that. Richard Hargreaves comments that nobody is better at free kicks and corners than Griffiths. We've been saying that as well, haven't we?
Do you know, it was good to see Lee getting back on the park yesterday, and in here we just knew that if there was going to be a breakthrough, it was coming from him. Some of us predicted it at half-time.
And by the way, yeah, you're right. And you'll keep mentioning it, I'm sure. Gary Doonan makes the point that Paddy Roberts, are we allowed to mention Paddy Roberts on transfer deadline day, played for us against his parent club and scored. So it may not be an issue to sign an AC Milan player and for him to play against AC Milan as well, Colin.
Coutinho done it last season as well for Bayern Munich against Barcelona. And that is, if we're going in and talking about strange transfer dealings, that is an incredible one. As part of the deal, when Liverpool sold Coutinho to Barcelona, it was inserted into the transfer that if Coutinho, not the team that he was playing for, was to win the Champions League, so Coutinho himself, no matter who he was at, was to win the Champions League, then Barcelona had to pay Liverpool a sum of money as one of the clauses. So for winning it with Bayern Munich, it cost Barcelona a lot of money.
Interesting, isn't it? The things that you do when you're desperate to sign a player, Colin. Good afternoon to TTV Glasgow FIFA, who's joining us on YouTube. Please, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to us on there. And Stevie Mullen, who is a great part of the ACSOM team. He'll be joining us on Thursday. He points out that this would be the first Uruguayan to play for Celtic, but certainly not the first to fight Celtic. So I'm hoping that John Clark would welcome him with open arms. James Larkin on YouTube. If this goes ahead, then I'll be quite happy. I think most Celtic fans would be, to be fair. And back to TTV Glasgow FIFA. Laxalt is a top player and we should count our blessings. AC Milan don't realise what a good player they have on their hands and are about to lose. And we are going to be looking at, in just a few moments, Celtic maybe losing players as well, Colin. So we'll definitely discuss that. But let's chat first of all about the transfer business we've yet to do. Obviously, if Diego Laxalt comes in, that's your left back situation, I would think, completely sorted and resolved. Where else do we need to strengthen? If Laxalt comes in, there's your left back. Where else do we need to strengthen?
As I said before, I'd quite like us to get another centre back in. I think you're always kind of running that risk of, injuries coming about. I mean, look at Beaton going off there. We moved El Hamid into centre half. I always think that El Hamid's best position's out on the wide. We seen it yesterday when he put that crossover. That was the best cross of the game, and it led to the first goal. You never really know. There could be a bid that comes in last minute today that for someone like Christopher Ayer that we just can't turn down. So I'd like to think that we're still kind of looking for backup options in that sense. And then on the right we have James Forrest, who we don't really know how long he's going to be out for. So I would quite like us to have someone ready if that was the case, that we could bring them in. I know Frimpong is really playing in that right wing back position at the minute, but there is going to be games this season where we can't really go with the 3-5-2, especially, I mean, say we go to the San Siro, we're not really going to play 3-5-2 there. I'd expect us to go with a more 4-4-2 or a 4-3-2-1, and in that case you still need someone out on the right hand side. I mean, if Forrest's going to be injured, then you'd be looking for someone to step up, and it's a lot of responsibility to put on someone like Karamoko Dembele, who hasn't actually been involved in the squads in the last couple of weeks. So I'd quite like to strengthen that position too. I
think Dembele will probably creep into the final section of this discussion, which is will anyone leave the club? Because he has been spoken about quite a bit on A Celtic State of Mind as a possible departure. Now, another player who has been linked via the Welsh media is Harry Wilson, Liverpool. He's a winger, Welsh internationalist. It would be a loan deal again, Colin, and this is the thing. There's so many players like that who are with the elite clubs down there. They've got such a big squad and they're playing under 23 football, or they're being loaned out to various clubs, and a lot of them ends up with quite a lot of loan deals, don't they? The parent club buys them in young, and then they're getting 6-month loan deals, 12-month loan deals. Would you be quite happy if a player like he came in?
I think Wilson's a really good player. From what I've seen of him, I've seen quite a lot of Liverpool's games, especially in the it was called the Johnson's Paint. I don't know what it's called now, where the under 23 teams are taking part, and Harry Wilson's a big part of that. He's played quite a few times for Wales, and I think he was on loan last season at Derby, or maybe someone can verify
Bournemouth.
that one for us. Was it Bournemouth he was on loan at?
He has been at Derby. But this is the thing with these young players, they go out on loan so often, so regularly, but he certainly has spent time at both clubs on loan. And
I think that when you've got someone who has got that bit of experience, still being quite young, I'd like to think that he's someone that could come up and do a job here. I know he was linked with the other side of Glasgow at the start of this transfer window, because basically that Liverpool connection with Gerrard, you're going to get some players being linked there.
You've got to confirm and clarify who you mean by the other side of Glasgow, because obviously we've got Queen's Park who have been in the news recently with that tremendous away strip that they've released, and we'll be speaking about that later on in the week, calling on a different podcast. But all right, Gerrard's the link.
So I mean, look at they always kind of utilise that link with Gerrard, bringing in guys that were a complete waste of time, like Ojo. But if Wilson is available and is looking to make that move, because the Euros are coming up, he'll be wanting some first team football. I think he's definitely an option for us, and if he ticks that right wing position, then I'd be happy enough with that.
Absolutely. Right, so that is interesting to have a look at that, and we'll also be asking our audience to comment on where you think we should still strengthen. It's not a done deal yet, you never know about these things, but it does look as though we're hoping to get Laxalt in the building. Charles Broadfoot, not had anyone of Naka's quality since he left. I think you're talking about the dead ball expert. We've got a few decent options in that respect at the club at the moment, but Nakamura was a bit special, wasn't he?
Just a bit, this kind of stuff that Nakamura done at Celtic, and do you know what? He's still doing it. I think he's like 41, 42. He's still playing in the J League in Japan. He's still
young, mate. At that age.
Oh, definitely. Especially if you compare him to certain people. Not having a go at you, Paul, don't worry. But he's still playing at a high level. There's a guy in his team that's, I think, 47, 48, that's the striker for them, and he's the left midfielder. He was phenomenal at Celtic. He gave us so many moments, not just the Man United goals, but goals at Rugby Park. He scored a fantastic goal against Dundee United where he chipped the goalkeeper from the edge of the box. He scored a hat-trick at Tannadice. He's a fantastic player, and when you look at it, if you were to get someone of his quality nowadays, you'd be paying a lot more than the $3 million that we paid Regina for him.
But as Fergus McCann once famously said, could he do it on a wet Tuesday night at Brockville? Beat it again on YouTube. Get Laxalt in, and it's been a very good transfer window, and it's one that we will be looking at in comparison to some of the previous windows at the end of this show as well, Colin, because it is always good to have a look at how Celtic are developing and progressing in terms of recruitment, because I do think it's improving. Meek67, I'm guessing Laxalt wouldn't be able to play against Milan. It all comes down to the respective clubs, because he certainly wouldn't be cup tied, would he?
No, I mean there's no cup ties now. It used to be if you played in the qualifiers you couldn't play in the group stage of the same tournament. That rule got taken out about 18 months ago, I think. It will depend what AC Milan have put into the loan deal. I would think that Celtic would move for that to be that he could play for us, because by the looks of it he's been out on loan maybe 4 or 5 times. He was a former teammate of Olivier Ncham at Genoa. So there's the partnership in there, and I mean you kind of hope that that part of the loan deal kind of things kind of been and gone now. You're only going to be playing 2 games as opposed to maybe playing each other in the league where it's kind of the done thing where you can't play against each other. So here's hoping that he'll be available for them games.
Yeah, absolutely. Martin Devine, you're commenting on Twitter. Welcome to the show. If we only sign a decent left wing back, I feel the squad is strong enough for 10 in a row if we retain everybody. And that takes us on to the next point, Colin. Some quotes from Neil Lennon recently. It will go to the wire, I'd imagine. We don't want anyone to leave. I'm very confident they will all still be here. So those quotes coming directly from Neil Lennon. We've already put 26 players out in this transfer window, 12 of which were loan deals, and 8 could be classed as first team players. Colin, if you had to keep one from the players that have departed during this transfer window, who would it be and why?
See, for me it'd probably be, I think it would be a kind of toss up between Hayes and Simunovic, and the reasons for that being it's the kind of positions we've been struggling to get replacements for at the minute. For the amount of time that we waited to get Shane Duffy in, we're playing games where we had Julian and Ayer, and that was really your only options. Beaton kind of came in, El Hamid sort of came in, but he was injured for a period. For me, I would have gave Simunovic a 1-year deal, and if we got the significant and sufficient cover in, then I'd have let him go on a free, because he was a good servant to us. Hayes, again, he was ever reliable. He was pretty much Neil Lennon's first sub every time. I can understand that he wanted to go and have that more stability. I think he signed, was it a 2 or a 3 year deal at Aberdeen, whereas Celtic only offered him a 1 year deal. So they're 2 guys that you could rely upon now and again. Simunovic not as much with his injury history, but it would have been good to have them part of the squad in the same sense that I would have kept Lustig when he moved on as well.
Yeah, you did say that, and he's obviously gone back to Sweden, isn't he? Lustig, after a season away, he's gone back to Sweden. But you referred to Lustig, and also Joe Ledley has been brilliant bits of business by Lenny back in the day, whereby we were bringing in a player in Ledley who I think himself said that they had turned down, Cardiff had turned down a bid of £6 million for him around about the time. So that was a kind of quality of player we were bringing in when Joe Ledley joined the club. And when we look at the players who have been linked to moves away from Celtic Park, Colin, on the back of Lenny's comments there, I'm confident that we're going to keep them all. You have suggested that Snodgrass was coming in to replace someone like Ryan Christie, I would guess. The other guys that have been mentioned of the 4 would be Ncham, Edouard and Ayer. Now, of course, Ncham's been linked to moves to France, but also to Southampton and West Brom. Edouard, Aston Villa and Arsenal have been quoted. Christie, Burnley, which has already been confirmed as not being the case from Neil Lennon. And Ayer has been linked strongly to AC Milan, a link that was confirmed and verified by Paolo Maldini himself. So, the 4 players that Neil Lennon wants to keep at the club, if we lose one, Colin, who would it be from those 4, and what's your reasons behind that?
It's a hard one. It would certainly not be Edward, and it would certainly not be Ayer, because I think at this late stage to get someone of their class in to replace them, you've run out of time now. We're sitting here just under 12 hours to go of the window, and you're talking about trying to get a deal like that done for someone of that quality. I'm sorry, that's just a no-brainer. That's not happening. So I would take them out the list. What you're left with is Ncham and Christie, 2 similar yet different types of players. Ncham with the more defensive mindedness. Christie certainly isn't shy of having a shot at goal and wants to be creative. I think for me, in that sense, I would probably be leaning more towards Ryan Christie. And I think that is going to probably annoy quite a few people, but I think Christie himself sees himself at a higher level than Celtic. He thinks he's got that ability to make the move on. I have heard that he was, at the start of this window, certainly looking to make that move down to the Premiership, and certain former managers of ours were linked with him.
You're allowed to say his name.
Okay, Brendan Rodgers was linked with making a move.
It wasn't Tony Mowbray, was it?
Well, that would be interesting. But Brendan Rodgers did inquire about him at the start of the window. His agent has been proactively looking to move him on. What kind of upset me looking back at the highlights of yesterday is, if you take a look at Ryan Christie, he doesn't celebrate the first goal.
Noticed that at the time. I noticed that at the time.
I mean, it could just be one of those things. I mean, but you just wonder, when we're talking about Edward being affected by transfer speculation, is someone like Ryan Christie also being affected by transfer speculation? He's not had the best start to the season. He blows a lot of hot and cold. What I'm just hoping for is that we don't sell any of them before the transfer window closes.
Well, that would be the ideal, you know. Ryan Christie, has he performed well this season? I think he has. I actually do. I think he has. Not just in the goals return. I was looking closely at his performance, particularly in the second half in Europe there against Sarajevo, and everything that we did creatively came through Ryan Christie. There was 8 points that I made, and that could be a delivery or a shot, and it was all coming through Ryan Christie. And I think when you look at that type of performance, yes, he gives the ball away a lot. A lot of his deliveries end up out the pitch, Colin. Mm-hmm. But I think I was saying this yesterday again. He does take risks. He's that type of type of player who takes risks. But because of that, he creates a lot of chances. He creates a lot for Celtic, and I think he creates a hell of a lot more than Ncham. So there's the balancing act there. Now, maybe his agent will be quite happy if he goes, because he'll get a cut. But so will Inverness Cally Thistle, because they've got a 15% sell-on clause on Ryan Christie as well. I would be far less happy if Christie was to go, of those 4, than Ncham, who is a player that I rate and regard very, very highly. But I think when you're looking at actually what they're providing the team at the moment, I think Christie's providing a hell of a lot more. But I take on board what you said there with regards to the celebration, and it might have just been him keeping his composure for the last 30 seconds of the game. That's why he wasn't celebrating. But, you know, when you score a goal at that point of the game, Colin, the raw emotion that you feel as a fan and as a player, sometimes it's hard to keep a lid on that. Yeah. So that was a bit of a concern. It took me back to some situations in the past where certain Celtic players had made it known and made it public that they wanted to leave the club, and they're walking about in the huff. And we all remember a player who has become legendary in Celtic fans' eyes, but Stan Petrov walking around the pitch when looking as though he didn't want to be there. And you're looking at that kind of petulant behaviour in any player, and I'm not happy about that in any player wearing the green and white hoops of Celtic. But again, we might be looking too much into the body language there, Colin. So we'll wait and see. I'm hoping that Christie stays. I really do. I like all 4 players. I want them all to stay. But if I was to choose one, it would be Ncham for me.
See, I think where we're kind of a difference here is, for me, Cham is a sort of more defensive minded player, and I think if we were to have an injury to, say, Brown or McGregor this season, then Cham's the guy that you're going to turn to, and he's going to be the one that comes in there. If you have an injury to Christie, I feel like we're more covered in that position. Elyounoussi can play in there, Turnbull can play in there. If Snodgrass was to come up and be the replacement, then he would be able to play in there as well. So for me, I'd rather see us kind of protecting that area at the back and keeping in Cham. The thing about Christie as well is he's getting to the stage where Peter Lawwell has always said, if someone signs a 4-year contract, after the 2 years is done, they either sign a second contract or it's someone that we try to move on. Now, I know the offer's been out there for Christie to sign a new deal. He's yet to sign it. So is that playing in the minds as well, that we don't want to lose someone on the cheap? Where's the kind of scenario there? For example, and I'll put it out to the viewers and to yourself, if we were to move on someone like Ryan Christie or Olivier Cham, what's the kind of fees that you think we would be looking for?
Well, again, I don't think Celtic can let any player go on the cheap. We were unhappy when we were hearing about Tom Roderick leaving for £4 million. You know, a few weeks later, he's on the park playing his bit, doing his bit against St Johnstone in what became a must-win game. I came in 5 minutes before the end and said that to you, Colin. We cannot afford to lose anything and drop any points here yesterday up in Perth. So, you know, nowhere near that fee when it comes to Christie. It would be nowhere near £4 million, because there's a player there under normal circumstances. If you were to sell him and he had a couple of years left on his contract, that's a question that, you know, would Celtic be happy to let him go for £14-15 million? I think that would be in that ballpark. Under the circumstances, does that take it down to the £8 million mark?
I think you'd be looking for somewhere in the region of £8 to £10 million for Ryan Christie. As it stands right now, if he was to go, say, today on the last day of the transfer window, I think that's the kind of fee that you'd be looking at. In Cham, there's been talk of him going for 14 million, 15 roughly, to, I think that was the last figure that was quoted, to West Brom and to Southampton. I think you'd probably end up getting more value for Cham because he has that experience of playing for the France under-21s. I also believe Cham's younger than Christie as well, so he's kind of got that as well. I don't know, as I said, I wouldn't want any of them to move on now. I think we really need to be coming out this window in a position of strength, and as it stands, if you're bringing in someone like Laxalt and you're managing to keep Edouard, Ayer, Christie and Cham, that for me means that we're coming out that window a lot stronger than what we went in it. And that's what we really need to do this window, and that's the way and the first step on the route to 10.
Theo Walcott's reportedly going back to Southampton today as well. So, you know, when you're looking at the merry-go-round in English football, Colin, it's hilarious. Like, you know, when the amount of players and the amount of money that's involved. And I've not seen anything mentioned about any of these 4 players. I mean, I know that Ayer's interest is elsewhere, but I've seen no interest in Cham, Edouard, and Christie. They've not been quoted. I know for a fact there was interest in January for Christie, and that Celtic would not play ball at that stage. And obviously, you know, we're way into his contract now. We're at that stage where if a deal can be done, we might want to get it done. Looking back at transfers in the past, Boyata, who eventually left for no fee when we had a bid on the table of circa £9 million. I don't think Lowell would be burnt like that again. No,
definitely not. And I think it even goes back to when Henrik Larsson left the club on a free transfer. I think when you let someone of that quality go and they see their contract out, then you are losing that kind of value. Peter Lawwell's always a businessman first. He's a businessman first and a Celtic fan second. And his job is to keep the Celtic business ticking over. So if the deal was to come through today for, say, £12 to £13 million for someone like Christie or for Cham, if it was required to balance the books, then he would certainly look to maybe get that deal done. But as you're saying, the interest really doesn't seem to be there as such, and there's been no concrete offers. We've not had bids turned down by Celtic for any players. So as far as I'm concerned, when we wake up tomorrow morning, I fully expect them 4 to be still Celtic players.
When I get to my bed tonight, you mean?
One of them ones.
Right, now, I do expect, though, there to be quite a lot of moves. I say quite a lot. You know, there's so many young players in that squad calling it need first team football. We've loaned out quite a lot. As I say, we've already got 12 loanees, 26 players out. A lot of them were youngsters whose contract was up. Would we be looking for deals for the likes of Dembele, getting him out on loan? Maybe Anthony Ralston, still part of that first team squad, doesn't seem to be quoted anywhere. These guys would be better playing elsewhere, surely, even if it is just on loan.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that it looks as though the Tunnock's wafer, caramel wafer, whatever trophy it's called, is not happening this season. So we're not even going to put a Colts team out into that tournament. So for me, that is the kind of signal that if you're a young player at Celtic and you're not in and around the first team squad, that is your key to make that games. Move out on loan. Yeah,
Aitchison's the other one.
Yeah, Aitchison, Henderson, Dembele, Ralston, Cameron Harper, guys like that, I think will definitely make the move out. The thing is, though, I think we've got to be careful as well that we don't send too many out, that if we did ever come to the fact that we were requiring guys in, like we end up having to recall Stephen Welsh last season, so you don't want to really get into that. But I'd rather these players were playing week in, week out at a decent level than just kind of, because who knows when their next game would be if they were playing for the
They need
reserves.
to play games, absolutely. Now, Colin, what is always interesting, and we've mentioned it a few times on a Celtic State of Mind, is how our transfer activity is developed over the years. So let's go back to the beginning of 9 in a row. Seems like a long time ago now. And the business that we were doing in season 1 of the 9, players coming into the club. When you're looking at some of the names mentioned, Kelvin Wilson, where is he now? Adam Matthews, adaptable, can play right or left back.
Signed for Charlton.
He was freed, wasn't he, from Sunderland?
Yeah, signed for Charlton this week.
Viktor Wanyama, we spoke about Wanyama coming in from Beershot for 900 grand. Fraser Foster coming in for one of his 4 deals, I think, that he's had. Yep. Mo Bangura.
The wrong Bangura we signed.
Probably. And El Kaduri. Now that's a bizarre one.
That was a great goal at Ibrox, though.
It was one of the strangest kind of players ever when you think about the lack of game time he actually got. Players going out, Andreas Hinkel, Niall McGinn, and Juarez. Who remembers Juarez?
Oh, fantastic, wasn't it? Was it like £4 million we paid for him when he came in?
A few good games. He was getting interest from the English top dogs. Next thing you know, he goes in international duty. It was never the same again.
Bermuda Triangle effect, isn't it? And
he's now playing for Ronnie Dyler. That's where he is now, Ephraim Juarez. So looking at that as a transfer window, Colin, how would you rate that compared to where we are just now?
I mean, obviously we've not included all the players that went out in that window. These are just the kind of key names. There was obviously, as you said, like this transfer window, 26 players leaving, so a lot of them are kind of youngsters like Dominic Chervy and guys like that who moved on. But when you look at it, it was all positions of strength, with the exception of maybe Mo Bangura. We knew we needed a striker, but we didn't really bring in the right striker. Wilson was fantastic for Celtic, eventually got homesick and moved back down south. Matthews, again, a young player coming in, but he settled right in there.
We got him in on a free, didn't we?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And again came in and done a real shift for us. Viktor Wanyama, fantastic, one of a kind, I think, Viktor Wanyama. It's sad to see him playing in the North American League. I think there's still so much more you could get out of Wanyama. I think he's at Montreal Impact at the minute, so coached by Thierry Henry. Great for him. I'm sure it's a fantastic lifestyle, but I still think there's so much more you could have got out of him. Fraser Foster, what can you say about him that hasn't already been said? It would have been maybe his 5th or 6th time at Celtic if he'd came back this summer. I feel as though when he looks back at his career, his time at Celtic will still be his happiest times and probably his most successful times. Going out, Andreas Hinkel, good servant to the club, great in the television adverts that he done. Niall McGinn went on to have a great career, just wasn't the right signing for Celtic. And Ephraim Juarez, well, I think we've already touched on that one.
Yeah, it was unfortunate because he looked like a player and then all went wrong. But when you're looking at that in terms of Neil Lennon signings, they're players that came in for the first team. I don't think, was there any truth in the rumour that Larsson didn't come back as a coach because we still haven't forgiven him for recommending Bangura?
I don't even think it was that Bangura he recommended.
He's one of the worst. He's one of the worst strikers I've ever seen at Celtic Park.
I can't remember if he scored.
El Kaddouri. He was a stopgap, wasn't he? He came in.
That was a loan deal.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're looking at the four main signings there, Wilson, Matthews, Wanyama, Forster, you start to get a sense of what Neil Lennon does. He brings in specific types of players, not particularly to develop them, just because he knows he can do a very specific job for Celtic. So that's not really changed. If you were to compare that season to this season, which is the best transfer window?
This season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. Moving on though, after that, we brought Forster back in again in season 2012-13. Effie Ambrose came in. Mm-hmm. Miku on loan, famous for the appearance in the Barcelona game. Kamenar, was it Nantes we brought him in from?
Goalkeeper.
The goalie.
This is where I feel our transfer business is not done today.
And
because Lennon always seems to throw in a third choice goalkeeper somewhere.
Really? And Laxalt.
Scored a great goal at Tynecastle.
Yeah, I mean, not as impressive, I don't think, when you look at the players coming in. Obviously, Ambrose played a lot of games. Forster did what Forster does. But the others, kind of nothing players, empty jerseys really in many respects.
I think that a lot of those, well, I say a lot of them, there was only 5 signings there, but Miku, Laxalt, Kamenar, they were all squad players. When you look at the team that we had then, we're talking like with the fantastic partnership up front of Gary Hooper and Anthony Stokes. Scoring goals for fun. This is the first season where it was between Celtic and Aberdeen for the title. Was this the first sign that we weren't going to be spending as much money without having a Glasgow derby to contest, and it was almost a shoe-in that Celtic were going to win the title? Still 2 good signings for Celtic in that sense, in Forster and Ambrose. Miku played in the Barcelona game and was actually one of the best players that day, and Laxalt could score the odd goal here and there. So overall, not too bad in the ends. If we take a look at the guys that went out, the big one there was the big money move, and it was Ki Sung-young. At the time, probably wasn't the biggest loss, but still a fantastic player.
It was, and he's still playing. He's had a great career since he left. I mean, his distribution was unbelievable. I still blame him for the fact that Kilmarnock beat us in the League Cup final though, because where that breakaway started, it was quite obvious that we were strapped at the back, and it was going to be a 1-on-1 or a 2-on-2, and all he had to do was take the boy out. But he was too cultured. He just didn't do it, did he? Yeah. On about the halfway line, he'd been booked for it, and he didn't do it. Other players that left, Chaduri, Juarez on a permanent. Chaduri wasn't my favourite player, I must admit. I remember seeing him against Sion, and it was dreadful. And I thought at that point he should never play for Celtic again.
The best thing about Chaduri is the Kevin Bridges story. Have you heard the Kevin Bridges story?
I have not.
Kevin Bridges met Nicole Scherzinger, and they were stuck in a lift. And they started talking to each other, and Kevin Bridges brought up the fact that at Celtic there was the song to the Pussycat Dolls, Don't You, which went, don't you wish your right back was Chaduri? And he found it hilarious, but Nicole Scherzinger walked away from him after that. Well,
so really when you're looking at that, as you say, they're stripping back to a degree, certainly not as impressive as the 11-12 season, and nowhere near as impressive as this season, I would guess.
No, and if you look at it as well, we got rid of a bomb scare in Leuven's and brought in a bomb scare in Ambrose, so I think we balanced the squad out there.
But he always smiled. 13-14, the third season of the 9, and we're looking at Amido Baldi, Danny McGrain's favourite player, Virgil van Dijk, Borigter, Beaton and Pukki. Mixed bag.
Definitely. And do you know what? We were excited about most of them, if not all of them, when they signed. Amido Baldi scored that winner against Liverpool in Dublin. Virgil van Dijk, I remember at the time when Virgil signed, there was one of the boys from Holland where I work, and he was convinced that Virgil was going to Ajax. So when he signed for Celtic, it was a complete surprise to everyone over there. But Richter seemed to kind of be one of those ones where we knew he was going to be injury prone from day dot. He was always injury prone, but we still spent £3 million on him, and he didn't really do anything for us. I think he scored 1 goal. Beaton, star man, still here, 28 years old. He's been here now on his 8th season.
Aye.
And he's kind of finally getting the recognition he deserves for his time there. Some people would have them in their team of the 9 in a row. Ever reliable, if not slightly controversial at times, but will always put in a performance. Got us through several qualification periods when it was guys like him and Owen O'Connell at centre half. And Timu Pukki.
I shudder to think. Pukki, what a penalty that was yesterday.
Oh, fantastic.
And then you're looking at players like Murphy, Ronya, Wanyama, unfortunately, Hooper, Wilson, McCourt and Watt leaving. The two biggies being obviously Wanyama or Hooper. That when you look at that as an overall transfer window, a wee bit disappointing, but your paybacks, Virgil van Dijk and Beaton really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that it was like £20 million between Hooper and Wanyama leaving. Mm-hmm. So this was a time when we were starting to really claw back the fact that
spending 2.5 on Virgil van Dijk.
Exactly, but overall, we didn't really replace Hooper, but replacing Ronya with Virgil van Dijk, fantastic. Mm-hmm. Wanyama with Beaton at the time, it kind of worked for us. Sad to see these players go, but we always know when players like that come in and they show that quality, they are going to move on, and that's just the kind of club that we're at.
If you were to compare that season to this transfer window that we're currently in?
Still this season. Unfortunately,
I agree with you.
Unfortunately, none of those three kind of tie in with where we're at right now.
No, I totally agree with you. Now, Colin, we have been looking at the updates. Sessegnon's confirmed Hoffenheim, he's Offski. But we haven't seen anything else coming in or leaving Celtic Park, but we will be coming back. When's the next bulletin? It'll be at 2 o'clock with Lawrence Connolly. All that's left for me to say is thank you, Colin Watt, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you very much, Paul.